It's been a crazy week, and I sat down earlier with Jason Miller, the longtime advisor to President Trump. Jason Miller, welcome. A judge or an appellate panel has ruled against Donald Trump on tariffs, on sending troops to Los Angeles, on freezing funds at Harvard. Do you have the sense that the courts are sort of mobilizing against the president's agenda?
Absolutely. And this seems to be the last line of defense for Democrats, is to rely on the judiciary. In many cases, these rogue district judges who are stepping in way outside of their bounds, that are trying to implement their own policy and try to subvert what President Trump is trying to do. So as each of those critical categories you went through, the important thing that you got to remember, this is what President Trump ran and won on, to go and do all these things, to implement this change. And so it's not Democrats that are standing in the way. Now it's something that's almost worse, which is judiciary, who are very much politicized.
But an alternative view would be that sometimes he pushes the legal envelope too far.
Well, except that you see a number of these where the cases are then overturned, whether it be at the district level or even going higher up. And so it very much is out of step with the entire country. That's why we have seen some beat back when it comes to some of these judges going way outside of their bounds. And I really think that this subverts democracy, like I said. And because President Trump should have the ability to do the things that people elected him to go and do, whether it be secure the border, keep our streets safe. You look at some of the great success that he's had already with Washington, D.C. These are things that people want to see. And especially with the trade efforts that are coming up, the president has to have the ability to lead as he was elected to do.
Since you brought that up, where do you think the Democrats are in terms of handling the crime issue? And is most of the media coverage against the crackdown, not just here in D.C., but possibly in future cities as well?
Yeah, so this is a real conundrum for Democrats, because at a certain point, especially when you talk about, say, blue state mayor or blue state governors such as J.B. Pritzker, he's going to have to make a business decision. Does he want to go and try to position himself for 2028 running for president, where he might get 1% in the Iowa caucuses, or is he going to try to actually be a leader and do, even as Joe Scarborough said, work with President Trump to make Chicago safe? And so I think Democrats are taking the bait here. They're really beholden to the AOC, the squad wing of the party. They think this is a winner for, where you look, crime was a good mover on the ballot in 2024. President Trump's efforts, what he's done already with Washington, D.C., as I referenced earlier, has been very, very successful, even with Democrats. So if they go and make this business decision, it's going to come back to hurt him at the polls in the midterms.
Now that we know that the president is not on the verge of dying, despite all the reckless online chatter about that, does it trouble you that some anti-Trumpers, Trump haters, are out there sort of openly rooting for his demise?
I really do think it's sick. And this is the latest, I guess, iteration of Trump derangement syndrome. And you would think that at a certain point, especially after President Trump won with such a mandate, the 77.3 million votes, the 312 electorals, sweeping all the battlegrounds, having these very successful policies, that Democrats would say, you know what, let's try to bring the country together. Let's try to get behind some of his efforts. But they seem to be so triggered that anything that President Trump stands for, they automatically oppose. I really think this hurts the discourse. It's turned much of social media into a complete cesspool. It's tough to even go and watch into this. And what we've seen also is the polarization. You look at, I guess it was MSNBC. I'm not sure what they're renaming it to now, something different. But it's become so triggered, so far out. I don't even think most normal people even want to spend 2 minutes watching programming like that.
When the president chose to blow up a Venezuelan ship filled with drug smugglers, 11 people were killed, he and Marco Rubio said, we are trying to send a message here. But others are saying that just to declare them a bunch of terrorists, and I have no sympathy for these people whatsoever, that the president doesn't have the power to just say, well, therefore, I have the authority to kill them rather than stop the ship.
Well, they are terrorists. They've been branded terrorists, and you can treat them as terrorists, and you can deal with them as such. And we saw they now sleep with the fishes, and they had a very quick end to their terrible lives. The fact of the matter is, over the previous 4 years with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the amount of drugs that came into this country, the amount of illegal aliens, the lack of safety, you think about the innocent people who've been killed by all the crime and the nonsense that went on. People wanted that to stop. That's why they put President Trump in. And so as we see these drug smugglers, these narco terrorists coming in, it doesn't matter if it's from Venezuela, from Mexico, or any of these other countries, they have to be stopped, because what they're sending, the filth that they're sending into the United States, then kills people. And the first rule of government, Howie, first rule, keep your people safe. That's exactly what President Trump is doing.
When the women victimized by Jeffrey Epstein were telling their stories of sexual abuse. And one of them said she voted for Trump. I wonder, the president said, well, this is a Democrat hoax. What's the hoax part?
Well, I think you got to go and separate the things here. So obviously, anyone who's been a victim of something like that, that's terrible. That should never be excused. That's a horrible situation. And it was just, everything about it was completely disgusting. Now, when you look at some of the Democrat operatives and Democrat super lawyer celebrities who are taking part in that event, that did become a politicized event. You look at political figures joining that then becomes a politicized event. And also when we saw the Democrats go and trying to push some of that toward whether it be the White House or anyone else, when very clearly this was a sick individual and the courts took action on that. And those are two separate things. But the Democrats shouldn't be out there trying to push, saying that somehow this has something to do with President Trump. That's a complete hoax.
RFK Jr., as you know, got really hammered, really by both parties, at that contentious hearing about the safety of vaccines and things that he had said. The media say Donald Trump has just outsourced this to a man who had a long career as an anti-vax crusader. Fair or unfair?
Completely unfair. So a couple of things. When you talk about Secretary Kennedy, first, he has said that what President Trump did with Operation Warp Speed was nothing short of a miracle. That was what President Trump, how he stepped in, he saved
Huge accomplishment
saved
in the first
millions of lives. In fact, it's one of the things that, quite frankly, I don't think President Trump ever got enough credit for was what they did. That was obviously in 2020. Now we're in the back half of 2025. It's been 5.5 years since that came onto the scene. The science has changed. The diagnoses have changed. What you do about it has changed. And already you have some 85 to 90% of parents are ignoring current CDC guidelines. So when you have a CDC that's really become weaponized and runs its own political agenda right now, when they're doing something that's against the wishes of 85, 90% of parents, then it's time to come in and restore that confidence.
Jason Miller, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
All but 2 Senate Republicans banded together to kill a surprise push from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, to force the release of the Epstein files. Sens Josh Hawley, R. Missouri, and Rand Paul, R. Kentucky, joined Senate Democrats in voting against the move from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, R. South Dakota, to table Schumer's amendment to Congress's annual defense authorization bill. Schumer announced on the Senate floor on Wednesday that he planned to file an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, that would require Attorney General Pam Bondi to release all the files and documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. He later told reporters that his amendment was effectively the same as the discharge petition in the House being pushed by Representatives Thomas Massie, R. Kentucky, and Ro Khanna, D. California. "There's been so much lying, obfuscation, cover-ups," Schumer said. "The American people need to see everything that's in the Epstein files, and my amendment would make that happen." The Epstein drama that has gripped the House has so far been more muted in the Senate, with only a pair of dust-ups between senators. Ruben Gallego, D. Aries Barr, and Mark Wayne Mullen, R. Okla, in late July, plus a push from Senate Democrats to eat away floor time last month. But Schumer's surprise move to file an amendment and force a vote on it comes as Republicans and Democrats are negotiating the annual defense bill, and further, trying to find a middle ground on a government funding extension ahead of the September 30 deadline. A Senate Republican source told Fox News Digital that Schumer's move was an extremely hostile act. "We were actively involved in bipartisan negotiations, and this could jeopardize that," the source said. The Epstein fervor reignited, however, when a card from the late pedophile's birthday book was revealed earlier this week that was allegedly sent by President Donald Trump. The card, which was first reported by the Wall Street Journal, featured a message and drawing, and has what appears to be Trump's signature at the bottom, and it was sent to the House Oversight Committee by the Epstein estate. The White House has vehemently denied the veracity of the card, and also disputed that it was Trump's signature. When asked why Democrats never released the files when former President Joe Biden was in power, Schumer pivoted back to Trump. "Look, the bottom line is the American people need to see this," Schumer said. "Donald Trump has lied about this. There was no picture. There was no drawing. There have been so many lies, so much prevarication, so much cover-up. The American people, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, are demanding it be made public," he continued, "and it should be. We hope Republicans will vote for it. They should."